Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmritam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Krishnaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharini Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaurabhakta. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So we are very honored to be in the presence of Shri Gauranga, Sitaram Lakshman Hanumanji, Shinaji, Bhagwan. And I'll speak on the topic of the power of blessings. This is from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adilila, 8th chapter, where Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, the author of Chaitanya Charitamrita, describes the background of how he came to write the Chaitanya Charitamrita. As all of us are aware, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared in Bengal 500 years ago and performed his beautiful pastimes. And one of the first recorded histories of Lord Chaitanya's pastimes have been written by Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur. And after that, the next recorded history was by Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. Mahaprabhu appeared in 1486, ended his pastimes in 1534. He took sannyas on January 14, 1510 and went for a South India tour for 6 years and came and settled in Jagannath Puri around 1516, and for the next 18 years he spent all the time in Jagannath Puri. First 6 years interacting with the devotees, last 12 years completely intrinsic, experiencing all his inner ecstasies. And then that was the period when Rupa and Sanatan in 1516 came to Vrindavan and the development of Vrindavan began. And in collaboration with the Rajputs and the Mughal Emperor Akbar, who became the emperor in 1555, with his capital in Delhi and Agra, the entire recreation of Vrindavan happened. And it was in the year 1572 that Srila Jiva Goswami commissioned Man Singh for creating the Govinda Dev temple. And the construction began in 1575, and in 1590 the Govinda Dev temple was inaugurated with the beautiful deities of Shri Radha Govinda Dev, which were originally made by Lord Krishna's grandson Vajranab and installed in Mathura, but later disappeared because of the attack of Mahmud of Ghazni in 1000 AD. And then later rediscovered by Srila Rupa Goswami, and those deities were installed in this beautiful temple. So it was in that period between 1530 onwards that Gaudiya Vaishnavas from across Bengal and Orissa started coming and settling in Vrindavan. And one such devotee was also Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, who was inspired by Lord Nityananda Prabhu, and he was a great devotee of Lord Chaitanya. And in this particular episode, as he's explaining his own history of how he came to write the Chaitanya Charitamrita, he's already in his 90s. So Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is demonstrating that Krishna consciousness service has no retirement age. And to begin the process of Krishna consciousness, there is no beginning age also. Prahlad Maharaj began in the womb. And therefore, you can start at any time and the service continues eternally. I was at an airport in Mumbai and as I was going to take the flight, somebody just called out from behind. Arey Swamiji, wait. So I stopped and turned behind and saw there was this gentleman in his late 70s walking up to me and he said, Arey, do you have Bhagavad Gita? Gita hai kya? I said, I don't have it here, it is in the temple. He said, I'm thinking that now at this stage in life I should start studying the Gita. I am almost 78. I think as per our Vedic tradition, this is a good age to start, right? So I said, what do you do? He said, I am a CA. I said, oh, chartered accountant. He said, no, complete aram. So, Prahlad Maharaj says exactly the opposite. That one can begin at the age of 5. Kaumaram Acharit. So Kaviraj Goswami is in his 90s. And he's saying, Ami pridha jara to likhite ka pae kor man kichu smorane na hoye. न देखिए नयने न सुनिए श्रवणे तबु लिखी ए बड़ा विस्मय. So he's saying, I am old, afflicted by old age, and as I try to write, my hand trembles. Likhite kaha paye kar. Mana kichu smarane na hoye. I am not able to remember anything. Na dekhiye noyane. With my eyes I can't see anything. Na shunye shravane. With my ears I cannot hear anything. Tabu likhi. Still I am writing. E bada vismay. This is astonishing. This is mind-boggling. How I am able to do this? So therefore, Kaviraj Goswami in these beautiful verses, first of all explains the great contribution done by Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur in giving us Chaitanya Bhagavat, which at that time was known as Chaitanya Mangal. Ore mudha loka shuna Chaitanya Mangal, Chaitanya Mahima te jani be sapal. So he's saying, I request all the readers to study the Chaitanya Mangal and understand the glories of Lord Chaitanya through this Chaitanya Mangal. And he says, Krishna Lila Bhagavate Kohe Veda Vyas Chaitanya Lilar Vyasa Vrindavan Das. So he says, just like in Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna Lila has been written by Vyasdev. So the Vyasdev of Chaitanya Lila is actually Vrindavan Das. So he is giving him the full credit. And then he says, why one should study the Chaitanya Mangal? Vrindavan Das Koila Chaitanya Mangal Jahara Shravana Nashe Sarva Amangal. By hearing this, all inauspiciousness will be destroyed. And along with that, one will experience the highest summit of Krishna Bhakti Siddhanta. Chaitanya Nityananda Jate Janiye Mahima Jaha Jate Jani Krishna Bhakti Siddhante Rasima. The limits of Krishna Bhakti Siddhanta are described in this Chaitanya Mantra. So therefore, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, 6 tattvas are actually described. When we hear the Bhagavatam, when we hear Krishna Katha, we are actually entering deep into experiencing these 6 tattvas. Krishna tattva, bhakti tattva, prema tattva sar, bhava tattva, rasa tattva, lila tattva ar. So Krishna tattva, bhakti tattva, prema tattva, bhava tattva, rasa tattva and lila tattva. All these 6 tattvas are there within any kind of authentic, genuine Krishna Katha. So these 6 tattvas are there within this Chaitanya Mangal also. And so he says that by hearing this, the Bhakti Siddhanta becomes very clear. Bhagavata jate bhakti siddhante rasa likyachi ihajani koriyache udhar. So whatever tattva has been described in Srimad Bhagavatam, that same tattva is also there here in the Chaitanya Bhagavat. And so he says, Chaitanya Mangala Shune Jadi Pashandi Jaban Seha Maha Vaishnava Huaita Takshan. And anybody who hears the Chaitanya Mangal or Chaitanya Bhagavat instantly becomes a Mahabhagavat. The transformative effect of hearing this Chaitanya Bhagavat is such that irrespective of whatever background one may come from, it transforms one's heart completely. That is the power of Chaitanya Bhagavat. So, before studying Srila Prabhupada's books, many of us may have been connected to some kind of spirituality, even visiting temples or being religious in our own way, in different traditions. But that was driven more by emotion, and the exact conception of tattva, or what is the philosophical conclusion, was missing. And therefore, the exact position and interrelationship between Ishwar, Jeev, Prakriti, Kala, Karma, we were not exposed to this, and we were probably emotionally driven in our practice, in whatever way we were doing. But by studying the Srimad Bhagavatam, by studying the Gita in the line of the Guru Parampara, the exact position of all of these different tattvas becomes clear. So therefore, what Srila Prabhupada has given to us is the clarity. And that's what the Guru Parampara offers. Clarity of vision. And there is no confusion about the interrelationship between all of these. So therefore, when Srila Prabhupada was in Amritsar, and there was like a big sadhu sammelan, and Gurudas Prabhu writes in his book, so many sadhus had come, and they were all speaking about, God and how one can be one with God, everything is one. So this was a very common, conception, misconception, understanding. And Prabhupada was sitting there and hearing, and suddenly he got up and started walking out. So Gurudas Prabhu got a little bewildered. He said, Prabhupada, you are the next speaker. Why are you going away? Prabhupada said, the level at which they are speaking, I think even you can speak. There is no need for me to present. So he said, Prabhupada, I am very new. You know enough. You can take care. And Prabhupada went. And then Gurudas Prabhu, he represented ISKCON and he was the speaker and he took the mic. And he said, let me give you an example. You are saying everything is one. Rasgulla is a sweet. Can it be same as the stool on the street? And when he said that, there was a gasp of shock amongst the audience. And they were totally bewildered by this example. They came running to Prabhupada after his talk and complained to him, your disciple is telling us to eat stool on the street. Prabhupada called Gurudas. Did you say that? He said, no Prabhupada, I just gave an example to show how everything is not one. They were saying everything is one, so I said a stool on the street same as Rasgulla the sweet. Prabhupada turned to all those sadhus who were complaining and said, my American disciples, they give very graphic examples. So I'll take care, you go. So they left. And Prabhupada turned to Gurudas and said, what was that? Rasgulla the sweet and stool on the street. Excellent example. So Prabhupada, his pranam mantra says, Nirvishesha Shunyavad. Paschatya Deshatani. So he came specifically to establish how each of these tattvas have their particular position. So here he says that Chaitanya Mangala Shune Jadi Pashandi Javan Seha Maha Vaishnava Hoita Takshana. Anyone who hears glories of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu becomes instantly transformed. Seha Maha Vaishnava Hoita. Instantly he becomes transformed. And so, considering the power and impact of such transformation, how could an ordinary literature have such impact? If it has such powerful transformative effect, it has to be written by someone who is transcendental. It cannot be a human effort. And so he says, Manushya rachite nare jaiche grantha dhanyam Vrindavan dasa mukhe Bhakta Sri Chaitanya. That Vrindavan Das was simply the instrument. The actual author of Chaitanya Bhagavat is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself. Vrindavan Dasa Mukhe Bhakta Sri Chaitanya. It is Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu who has written this. And therefore it is not Manushya Rachitena. It is not written by human beings. It is not a human effort. And so Srila Prabhupada also mentioned in one of his Prabhupada memories, pastime with one of his devotees, Krishna told Srila Prabhupada to come to the material world to write these books. Prabhupada did not want to come, but he said, no, you should go to write these books. So there was an interview, and one newspaper reporter was asking, so how could you write so many books, Swamiji? Prabhupada said, Krishna speaks to me and then I write. So the reporter got bewildered. What? Krishna speaks? So one devotee was sitting nearby. He said, what he means is Krishna gives inspiration and then after he gives the inspiration, Swamiji thinks and then he writes. Prabhupada turned around to the disciple. He said, who are you to give explanation? I said, Krishna speaks. We are giving interpretation. So Prabhupada would sit and hear the Krishna book himself and he would say, I am simply relishing the words of Krishna. So Manushya Rachite Nare. So these are all transcendental words. Otherwise they cannot have such impact. So Vrindavan Das is glorified by Kaviraj Goswami. So question arises that Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, you have so much appreciation for Vrindavan Das Thakur and Chaitanya Bhagavat. And you are saying Chaitanya Bhagavat is transcendental, it has the best tattva, it has transformative effect, it can transform anybody, it has the best tattva. You are only glorifying. So then why you wrote Chaitanya Charitamrita? If this Grantha is so perfect, what was the need for you to write? So now he comes to that point that Chaitanya Chandra Lila Ananta Apan Varnite Grantha Hoila Vistar. So as he was writing, Vrindavan Das Thakur was writing the Chaitanya Bhagavat, Varnite Grantha Hoila Apar. The glories of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he was writing with such elaborate detail that by the time he came to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's sannyas pastime, Adilila, Madhilila, Antalila of Chaitanya Bhagavat was over, and Mahaprabhu had not even taken sannyas. And then specifically, Vrindavan Das Thakur was a great devotee of Nityananda Prabhu. Nityananda Lila Varnana Hoila Abesh Chaitanya Rashesha Lila Rahila Avashesh. And he was in such avesh, he entered into the pastimes of Lord Nityananda with so much of ecstasy that he could not control the number of words he was using for explaining Nityananda's pastime. Nityananda Lila, right? Nityananda Lila Varnane Hoila Avesh. Because of his devotional ecstasy in glorifying Lord Nityananda, he had no control over how much or how many words he is utilizing in describing Lord Nityananda. And this is the effect of Avesh. When one goes into ecstasy, when one, describes the Lord's pastimes in great detail, he forgets the influence of time factor. So Vrindavan Das Thakur forgot about the fact that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took sannyas, and beyond sannyas also there are so many pastimes, that by the time he came to sannyas it was like, a huge literature. And then the devotees told Vrindavan Das Thakur, are you ever going to publish? Or you are going to write forever? So Vrindavan Das Thakur at that point ended writing the Chaitanya Bhagavat with the majority of the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu only till sannyas. So Srila Prabhupada also, when he would be writing these literatures in the middle of the night, and interestingly Prabhupada wrote these Bhaktivedanta purports from midnight till early morning. Just imagine, get up at 12 o'clock tonight and try to write something till 6 o'clock for 6 hours at night. We may write something, it may not be worth reading. But Prabhupada would get up, write, in the sense he would give in the dictaphone, and then next day devotees would transcribe it. And this was going on for years and years. And Haridas Prabhu, Prabhupada's disciple in Mumbai, he was coming from a pickpocket background, and he said to Prabhupada at night that Srila Prabhupada, in the whole Juhu land, only 2 people are awake at night. You and me. You because you are writing the books, and me because I was a pickpocket, I was awake all night before. So I am not used to sleeping at night. You are busy translating, what do I do? So Prabhupada said, there is a service for you. There are dogs which are barking all night and disturbing my translation. You take a stick and keep chasing them. So Prabhupada gave him the service of chasing the dogs all night. But Prabhupada knew that this was an important service. And it's interesting that from 1955 to 1965, Prabhupada wrote only first canto. He came to America with one canto. And between 66 to 77, Prabhupada wrote 9 more cantos. And then he wrote the entire Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adilila, Madhilila, Antilila. Adilila, 17 chapters, Madhilila 25 chapters, Antilila 20 chapters. The Nectar of Devotion, Krishna book, almost 80 books in those 11-12 years. And all that in the midst of opening temples, building projects, acquiring property. And if you read Giriraj Maharaj's recent book, I'll Build You a Temple, 1971 to 77, practically he spent significant time fighting the property issue at Juhu. But along with that, Srila Prabhupada was also absorbed in writing these books. Every day he would be giving class. He was completely in Avesh. So that is the power of absorption. So Vrindavan Das Thakur also was, in his mood of absorption. In our Kartik Yatra, many years ago, Radhanath Swami was giving a lecture on the 6 Goswamis in Vrindavan, Pogla Ashram. Lecture began in the morning, 9:30. And we were supposed to go after lunch for all the darshan of the temples. So around 12 o'clock, 12:30, we started, setting up the prasadam for distributing. And then we set it up right at the backside, as quietly as possible. But people who were sitting in the back would smell the prasad. And the prasadam doesn't need much advertisement. And people turned around and they could see that, okay, very soon something is happening here. So around 200 devotees who were sitting right at the back, they got up. And they kind of started standing in line in a very strategic way. They knew where the line began. So they were standing, but they were also kind of standing in a very discreet way. Not to make it obvious that they are standing for prasadam. But at the same time, they knew if the prasadam distribution begins, they would be the first. So there were 3,000 people, so it made sense to be at the lead position. And lecture had begun at 9:30, so obviously, logically, 12:30, 1 o'clock it should end. At 1 o'clock, Maharaj said, "Shall I continue?" Nobody expected that. So, as usual, everybody in the audience, they were trained to say only one thing, Hari Bol. They all said Hari Bol, but the funniest part was these 200 people who were standing in line. They also raised their hands and said Hari Bol. Although it was clear why they are standing. So again, after 2 hours, he again said, "Shall I continue?" Lecture finally ended at 4 o'clock. So, when one sometimes get into the process of glorifying Krishna, then one may get absorbed. So Vrindavan Das Thakur also got absorbed. Nityananda Lila. Nityananda Lila. Chaitanyara Shesh Lila Hoila Avashesh. And remaining pastimes of Lord Chaitanya were left behind. So he says that the devotees in Vrindavan were eager to hear about Lord Chaitanya's pastimes. शैशबलीलार शुनिते विवरण वृंदावनवासी जत वृंदावनवासी भक्त उत्कंठित मन. So Vrindavan devotees, the Vaishnavas who were in Vrindavan, they became eager to hear about Lord Chaitanya's pastimes after his sannyas. Those pastimes had not been revealed by Vrindavan Das Thakur. So that was yet to be revealed. And therefore, Vrindavan Vasi Bhaktir Utkantitaman. Their desire became intense and they became extremely eager to hear about that. So this is a very, very crucial point, that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu specifically came for the purpose of establishing Harinam Sankirtan in every town and village. And he primarily established that Sankirtan mission post-sannyas. And unless his post-sannyas leelas were described in detail, one would not get a glimpse of how the Sankirtan movement was actually established. Sri Krishna Gopal Premete Bhasila Lokas Vriddha Abal. And Lord Chaitanya engaged all categories of devotees in society in the Sankirtan movement. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu traveled towards South India, roaring the holy name like a maddened lion. Mattasimha pray Prabhu Purila Gaman Prema Beshe Jai Kori Nama Sankirtan. And in great ecstasy he was chanting the holy names, inundating the whole world with Harinam Sankirtan. And all of this began at Alarnath. After sannyas, just before Lord Chaitanya started his South India tour. So these pastimes were yet to be revealed. The glories of the holy name, the glories of how Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu envisaged that in every town and village, all the conditioned souls take to the process of chanting and take shelter of Harinam Sankirtan. Because Krishna describes in the Bhagavad Gita, this material world is dukkhalayam ashashvatam. It's a place of misery, it's a place of suffering. Prabhupada gave initiation to Bhavananda Prabhu and said, your initiated name is Bhavananda Das. Then Prabhupada said, do you know what is the meaning? He said, yes Prabhupada, one who is absorbed in Bhav Bhakti. Prabhupada said, that would have been Bhavananda. Your name is Bhavananda. So he said, what does it mean? So Prabhupada said, one who takes pleasure in Bhava, the material world. So is it a spiritual name or a material name? What kind of a name is this? One who takes pleasure in material world. How? Then Prabhupada said the material world is a place of misery and suffering. But there is only one pleasure. The pleasure of serving and glorifying Krishna. You cannot change the nature of this world. The nature of this world continues. But in the midst of all the suffering, one takes shelter of the process of chanting the holy names, glorifying the holy names, and distributing. That's the only pleasure available in this world. Prabhupada was in Mexico and his disciple was massaging him and mosquitoes were biting him. But he saw that the mosquitoes are not biting Srila Prabhupada. So he said to Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, the mosquitoes are biting me but they are not biting you because looks like you're a pure devotee. Prabhupada said, it may be here, but in Calcutta the mosquitoes don't make any difference. So Prabhupada was sitting and giving class in Calcutta, 3C Albert Road, and the mosquitoes were kind of circumambulating above his head. And Prabhupada kept looking at them for some time, then walked down from the Vyasasana. And then he said, just see, the mosquitoes here are so powerful, they have dethroned me. Then in the initial days, the mosquitoes in Mayapur were also very huge. Big, powerful. They could pierce through any chadar. And one of the disciples got bewildered and he told Prabhupada, you said Mayapur is a spiritual world. But the bite of the mosquitoes is so deadly. Are there mosquitoes in the spiritual world? Prabhupada said, even if they are chanting Hare Krishna. But the nature of this material world cannot be changed. So one should not think that by taking to Krishna consciousness or the process of Krishna consciousness is an insurance against fate. Krishna consciousness is not an insurance against fate. It is an insurance against loss of faith in spite of unfortunate fate. So therefore, Krishna made sure that he spends more time with the Pandavas than even with the Yadavas, to show that I love the Pandavas more, because in spite of the fact that they are suffering continuously, even in my presence, and they have the privilege of questioning me of why they are going through this suffering, they are going through the suffering without ever questioning me or asking me why we are going through this. Yatra dharma suto raja gada panir brupodara Krishnostrigandivam chapam suhrit krishnastato vipat. Bhishmadev says, just look at the family of the Pandavas. Yudhishthira Maharaj is dharma personified, Bhima is power personified, Arjuna is skill personified, Nakul and Sahadev is loyalty personified, Krishna is well-wisher personified. They have everything which a perfect family can aspire for. But still they are going through suffering repeatedly. Suhrit Krishnas tato vipat. And therefore, the Pandavas realized that the real fortune is not going through prosperity or avoiding adversity. But the real fortune is the ability to remember to serve Krishna in the midst of prosperity and adversity. So therefore here, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has come to spread that message. And so Mahaprabhu says, Mahavipattau samsare yasmaret madhusudana vipattau tasya sampatti bhavetityaha shankar. In the midst of prosperity and adversity, the conditioned soul's tendency is to ask the question, why I am going through adversity? In prosperity, he asks the question, why only this much? Why not more? But Lord Chaitanya says, in both prosperity and adversity, you should ask only one question. How can I serve you? Prosperity comes, how can I use this prosperity in your service? Adversity comes, okay, no problem. How can I continue serving you? Therefore, Lord Chaitanya says, Kirtaniya Sadahari. Whether prosperity comes, adversity comes, keep chanting Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
We had a college student in our medical college. He was like very enthusiastic preacher. He would preach so much that I would tell him that, Baba, you should study also. Because tomorrow you have to be a doctor. So he said, no, Krishna is there. And I have heard your lectures where you have said, Krishna will take care. I said, Baba, if something happens, don't hold it against me. So it was one day before exam, he was standing in front of our Radha Gopinath deities with eyes closed and praying for half an hour. I got nervous. Tomorrow is exam, he's standing here. I came to him and said, hey, what are you praying? He said, I am telling Radha Gopinath ji, the whole campus knows I am Hare Krishna because I am preaching. So I am telling Radha Gopinath, the future of Hare Krishna movement is in the campus is in your hands. But if I fail, people will lose faith in Krishna and Hare Krishna will lose credibility. So it is in your hands. So I said, wow, what a negotiation. And then next day exam was there, and then a month later the results came and he passed. And on the day the results came, I had a program. So I went to the hostel. Usually for my lectures, 8 or 10 people would come for lecture. For prasadam, 50 would come. Some of them would come and open the door and make sure that lecture is over. And some of them would be so shameless, they would open the door and say, Abhi tak khatam nahi hua. Lecture not yet over. As if I am a big obstacle between them and prasad. So, that day for lecture, 50 people were sitting. I got bewildered. I rechecked whether I am in the right room or not. I said, how come all of you have come today? And they said, if that particular student, they took his name, if that guy could pass the exam, it means Krishna is present. Otherwise, it is not possible. Not just that, so many of his other colleagues who studied like anything, they couldn't make it. They got like a major inferiority complex. And not only that, he got postgraduate seat also, which bewildered few other people. So his result put at least 8 or 10 people in depression. Now, when he came to the post-graduation, I requested him that in undergrad, you put a lot of load on Krishna. At least in post-graduation, you take some responsibility of studying. He took that seriously, studied well, and in the post-graduation, he got the gold medal in Mumbai University. So Lord Chaitanya, he has specifically come to show us how in all circumstances of this material world, whether there is prosperity or adversity, ups and downs, plus or minus, the material education system and the material world and the society around us is only teaching us how to ask the question, how can I gain more? How can I benefit more? How can I maximize my selfish personal benefits and minimize my losses? That is material life. But Lord Chaitanya is saying you have to replace that questioning with the question of how can I serve you in prosperity? How can I serve you in adversity? That is the meaning of Kirtaniya Saranghari. That's why Lord Chaitanya has come to teach us. Ghare Krishna bhaji more pora shirvade Nila chole asi jena tomar prashad. As Lord Chaitanya is starting his tour of South India, he asks and requests Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, give me blessings so that I can go to South India and return back. Prabhupada says, Lord Chaitanya is sannyasi, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya is grihastha. Sannyasi is asking blessings of grihastha? How is this? So Lord Chaitanya says, Hare Krishna Bhaji, you are worshipping Krishna at home. Because you are worshipping Krishna at home with sincerity, I empower you to even bless the sannyasi. Hare Krishna. So Prabhupada says, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has given equal power to everybody. And therefore even Srila Prabhupada himself was a grihastha with 5 children. And one of his children were also Prayagraj, his name was, and he got mentally retarded. He was roaming around in the streets of Calcutta. So Prabhupada himself went through a lot of struggle in his family life. It was not like an easy ride for him. His businesses went through ups and downs. His wife would many times not support. Children had challenges and difficulties. So Srila Prabhupada had a tough life as a grihastha. In Prayag, in Kolkata, sometimes in Mumbai. But all through, Srila Prabhupada kept up his commitment in the practice of the process and preaching Krishna consciousness. So, Srila Sridhar Maharaj had a disciple whose name was Bhakti Sundar Govinda Maharaj. When Bhakti Sundar Govinda Maharaj was a brahmachari, his name was Govinda Brahmachari. He had joined Gaudiya Math very recently, young brahmachari. Srila Prabhupada was already grihastha, senior person. So Srila Prabhupada as Abhay Babu, he would invite Govinda Brahmachari, let us go for prachar, Nam prachar, preaching in the evening. So Govinda Brahmachari would say, but I am very new. I don't know the tattva. I can't do prachar. I don't have the confidence. And Abhay Babu would say, you just come because you are in saffron. People will respect you. Crowd will gather. I will take care of prachar. You come. So he would make him sit on the Vyasasana. He would do kirtan. After the kirtan was over, Prabhupada would be sitting in the audience. Then Prabhupada would turn towards the audience and give full lecture. Then after the lecture, he would tell the audience, take blessings of this. But all through Grihastha life, he was completely dedicated to preaching. Ups and downs, prosperity, adversity, this, that, whatever. So therefore it is the sincerity and commitment which matters more than anything else. So Prabhupada was in Sitakant Banerjee Lane, and on the first floor he had given his, first floor room to the Gaudiya Math brahmacharis to teach Harinamamrita Vyakaran. So Dol Govinda Shastri was Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati disciple. He was a Sanskrit scholar. He was teaching Harinamamrita Vyakaran. So nowadays in India we have in front of college towns bases and voices, hostels for the college students. So the first was Prabhupada's house itself, on Prabhupada's first floor. So now if any of you are going to Mayapur, Kolkata, so you should visit one Ulta Danga Junction lane. Right? One Ulta Danga Junction. On the first floor in 1922, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur gave instruction to Srila Prabhupada to go to the west and spread Lord Chaitanya's mission in the English language. So it's a historical building which has been now acquired by ISKCON, and in the last 2 years during COVID time, our Radharaman Prabhu and other devotees have restored that property so beautifully. You will get goosebumps if you visit that place. It's restored extremely well, with all the traditional Bengali artistic, influence of that time. And when you go to the first floor and you see that place where actually that conversation happened, so that property is advertised as the birthplace of ISKCON. And just few kilometers away is Prabhupada's birthplace, and this is the birthplace of ISKCON. That's the place where the idea was given. So, Dol Govinda Shastri was giving talk on Harinamamrit Vyakaran, and he came out of his room on the first floor and he sat on the stairs next to Abhay Babu. Prabhupada was a grahastha and he was sitting and chanting. And Dol Govinda Shastri spoke to Abhay Babu. Abhay Babu, I am thinking I am giving this lecture on Prithvi Tyache Joto Navaradi Gram Sarvatra Prachar Hoile Muranam, in every town and village the holy name will spread. But I don't know how it will happen. Will it ever happen? So Prabhupada was chanting, he got up, took 2 steps down, turned around and looked at Dol Govinda Shastri and said, if Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has made that prediction, it has to come true. Then Prabhupada took 2 steps down further, turned around and pointing towards Dol Govinda Shastri, he said, someday a fool who surrendered at the lotus feet of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur will make it happen. And then Prabhupada took 2 steps down further. And Dol Govinda Shastri was himself Saraswati Thakur disciple. He started thinking, will it be me? And then Prabhupada turned around and said, it will not be you. So Dol Govinda Shastri thought, what does Abhay Babu think? He will do it? How can he do it? He can never do it. He is always thinking of business and money. That's what most people in Gaudiya thought. Nobody gave a chance to this grahastha who has had only 2 interactions with his spiritual master to create history in Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. So therefore, revolutionary changes have happened in Vaishnava history, not on the basis of the assets of money, manpower, land, political influence, etc. Revolution only happens on the basis of one asset, the asset of hope and faith, in the words of the predecessor acharyas. Shraddha shabde vishwase kohe, sudrida nishchay, Krishna bhakti koile, sarva karma krita hoye. So Srila Prabhupada had that asset, faith in the words. So if one has the faith in the words of the Guru Parampara, then anything can happen. And therefore I was sharing with Nilamani Prabhu that there is no record in history of ISKCON that any ISKCON temple construction has begun and it has not completed. So when you look at the site, you may think when it will end, how it will end, and how it will happen, and this and that. But we are third party. And we have seen many such projects and many such sites. It is Krishna's temple. And the timeline of when he wants to come and occupy is decided by him. So you don't go to sleep. But you do your best and Krishna will take care of the rest, and 100% the temple will come out to be more beautiful than what it is in the 3D diagram. So therefore, during the process of construction, so many people will be saying so many things. That is part of Vrindavan Leela. So that is to keep you inspired. That yes, we have to make sure it is done. So therefore, when the community comes together and decides that we will build a beautiful house for Krishna to come, so Krishna empowers. So here, the Govinda Dev temple was built. In 1590 it was commissioned. And it happened because of the collaboration between the Rajput kings, the Mughals, and the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. And it was here that this conversation is happening. So Kaviraj Goswami now comes to the point that he has been ordered by the Vrindavan Vaishnavas to write on Lord Chaitanya's Leelas post-sannyas. Now he is standing in front of Radha Govinda Dev in Vrindavan. And he is saying, Vrindavane kalpadrume suvarna sadan mahayoga pita ratna simhasan. In Vrindavan there is a beautiful Ratna Simhasan, Kalpa Vriksha, and on that Ratna Simhasan, beautiful deities of Radha Govinda are standing. Tate vasi ache sada, Brajendra Nandan, Shri Govinda Devanam Sakshat Madan. Shri Govinda Dev is standing there more beautiful and more enchanting and more attractive than Cupid personified. And there is a gorgeous seva happening because it is being sponsored by Man Singh, the general of Akbar. Raja seva hoye taha vichitra prakar, divya samagri divya Vastra Alankar. Raja Seva means royal worship. Divya Samagri, Divya Vastra, Divya Alankar. Everything is being offered the highest quality. And how many servants are there? Sahasra Sevaka Seva Kore Anukshana, Sahasra Badane Seva Najaya Varnam. Thousands and thousands of devotees are serving, and with thousands of mouths it is not possible to describe what seva was going on. So, in that 1590 to 1670 period when Aurangzeb attacked, in that 80 years period, Vrindavan was experiencing the peak of patronage and opulence, unlimited resources, money, manpower, everything flowing. So history has always shown us that sometimes temples will be flourishing, other times temples will be floundering. But the deities continue standing there, waiting patiently, inspiring everybody, smiling in the midst of everything. 18 times Jagannath temple was attacked between 1000 AD till today. And all those 18 attacks have been chronicled in detail. During some of the attacks, Jagannath was outside the temple for more than 100 years. So one of the most traditional temples which have always been accorded royal patronage has gone through so much of difficulty. You can take the deities out of the temple, but you cannot take the deities out of the devotee's heart. And therefore, Because the devotees carry the deities in their heart, they continue to strive to bring the deities back into the temple. And so if you go to Govindadev temple in Vrindavan, you will see it's kind of empty, so many monkeys around. None of that opulence which is described here is seen. So the temples which have been built by the Manjaris, the eternal associates of Krishna in the spiritual world, Krishna, he allows everybody to play on a level playing field. His own Dham Vrindavan, his own associates, the deities which have been made by his own grandson, Krishna, allows different kinds of adversities to impact such temples and tests the devotees' faith, how they continue serving in the midst of all those challenging situations. So like that, also till 1977, ISKCON was flourishing in the West. Srila Prabhupada from 66 to 77 went around the world several times establishing 108 temples. In those 11 years, 108 temples. In India, there were only 5 temples. Vrindavan, Mumbai, Mayapur, Kolkata, Hyderabad. Prabhupada spent more time from 1971 to 77 in India. 60%, 70% time Prabhupada spent in India in those 7 years. And in Mumbai. But Prabhupada had only 5 temples in India. He had 5,500 disciples, out of which only 20 were Indian. And at that time, Prabhupada in 1977 writes a letter to his disciples in Mumbai from London, saying that I am so sorry that I could not spend as much time with all of you across the world because I got caught up in this fight in Mumbai. I should have spent more time with my Western disciples in different parts of the world, but somehow because of this conflict, only I could handle that, so I could not spend time. But although he spent more time in India, Prabhupada could not have the satisfaction of seeing people in India become practicing devotees at that time. So therefore in 1977, ISKCON meant only Western devotees. And then in the 80s there were challenges, problems, so many difficulties happened, leadership crisis happened, the crisis of faith happened, and so many devotees left the temples. Those temples which are filled with devotees, they all emptied all of a sudden. And ISKCON has never recovered in the West from that crisis. 40 years have passed. But sometimes when a crisis happens, it becomes difficult to recover. So therefore, here in Vrindavan also, at that particular point in time, Radha Govinda temple is described as Sahasra Sevaka Seva Kore Anukshanu, Sahasra Vadane Seva Najaya Varnam. Millions and millions of devotees serving. And so he says, amongst all such devotees, the leader of Radha Govinda temple, the Mahanta, was a disciple of Srila Rupa Goswami, whose name was Pandit Haridas. And he says, Sevara Adhyaksha Shri Pandit Haridas, Tara Yasha Guna Sarve Jagate Prakash. Pandit Haridas, his qualities were world famous. Sushila Sahishnu Shanta, Vadanya Gambhir, Madhura Vachana Madhura Cheshta Mahadhir, Sabar Sammana Karta Koren Sabar Hita, Kautilya Matsarya Himsana Janita Rachita. So what are his qualities? Sushila, well behaved, Sahishnu, tolerant, Shanta, extremely peaceful. Vadanya, compassionate, Gambhir, grave. Madhura Vachan, very sweet in his speech. Madhura Cheshta, sweet in his dealings. Mahadhir, very sober. Samara Samman Karta, always giving respect to others. Koren Saman, well-wisher of all. Kautilya, he did not have any duplicity. Matsarya, did not have envy. Himsa, was not violent towards others in his dealings. He was completely well behaved. And that was his quality, which made him the ideal leader of Govinda Deva temple. Vaishnavera gunagrahina dekhai dosh, oy mane vakya kore Vaishnava santosh. And his best quality was he would not see the devotees' faults. As a leader, he knew that everybody has come to the temple and it is my duty and responsibility to engage them in the service of Thakurji, in the service of their lordships. Whatever qualities they have need to be engaged. So I have to be Vaishnavera Gunagrahi, catch their good qualities. Na dekhai dosh. I cannot afford to see their faults. Because after many lifetimes, the soul has come to Krishna. And therefore, that faith of that soul has to be nourished. So Prabhupada says temple is like a stock exchange where people come with a deposit of faith to invest. And so we have to allow it to grow. Kai mane vakya kori Vaishnava santosh. So therefore, how we can please the devotees in all circumstances and situations. So Shyam Sundar Prabhu says, Prabhupada was always so encouraging that in 1968, 69, he came to Prabhupada and said that, I have a bad news to share. Prabhupada said, what? He said, because of some mistake I did in the past, the police has opened the case and I have to go to the jail. And Shyam Sundar Prabhu was very terrified. How would Prabhupada react? That devotee has to go to the jail. There will be like loss of reputation of ISKCON and this and that. So Prabhupada, I have to go to jail. Prabhupada said, well, Krishna was born in jail. He said, oh wow, Prabhupada didn't judge me. Then Prabhupada said, why you are going to jail? He said, Prabhupada, I was dealing with drugs. Prabhupada said, oh, me too. I was running Prayag pharmacy. He kind of, made it light. He said, oh. And Prabhupada said, how much time you are going? He said, 3 years. That means from 69 to 72, he would have been inside. Prabhupada said, don't worry. You continue chanting, you will be released. He went to jail in 2 months. The warden came and said, there is a release order. He said, how come? He said, don't ask me. I am only bringing the order. So, if that had not happened, you would be inside and there would be no George Harrison, there would be no Cross Maidan, there would be, we can't even imagine. Everything just manifested. So Shyam Sundar Prabhu comes to Mumbai and Prabhupada says, let's have a Cross Maidan festival. And he just empowers, organize. They're coming first time to India. And it is not that there was like a super excellent communication and this and that. They take some life member's car and Shyam Sundar Prabhu was driving through Kalbadevi market and you know how crowded it is. And India having driving license means nothing. Along with driving skills, you need to have mystic power also. To be able to navigate. Even those of you who are from India, now you are used to driving here. I'm sure you'll find it difficult to drive. So he starts driving and In Kalbadev market, he hits somebody, and the guy drops on the ground, and there is a whole crowd which surrounds the car, starts looking inside. Shyam Sundar Prabhu takes the beat bag, starts chanting, because he has heard that in accident people just bury the driver or burn the car. He has heard all kinds of stuff. And then the next moment he sees the public sees Shyam Sundar Prabhu, then they jump on the guy who was hit and start beating him. So he gets even more bewildered. I made the mistake, why is he getting beaten? So then he thought maybe in India they begin from there. And then, after beating him up, they turn aside and tell Shyam Sundar, you go ahead. He says, but why did you beat him? Poor fellow. And one of the guys who spoke English, he looked at Shyam Sundar Prabhu and said, you are Krishna devotee. Because he was dressed in dhoti kurta and tilak. You are a Krishna devotee. How dare he disturb a Krishna devotee? So Shyam Sundar Prabhu thought, wow, what a country, what a culture. Even if you are dressed as a devotee, you get so much of respect. So what a great responsibility to live as per expectations. So Prabhupada actually empowered them to spread Krishna consciousness. And although so many people would give so many feedbacks and comments that they don't know this, why you are giving them this. But Prabhupada, as a leader, had 5 qualities. He was humble, Prabhupada was enthusiastic, Prabhupada appreciated all, Prabhupada recognized excellence, and Prabhupada gave creative freedom. And because of that, even those who had no background of organization and management, they could establish Krishna consciousness and created a global footprint for Gaudiya Vaishnavism which had never happened before. And the books published by the BBT were a masterpiece. And the books were distributed. And with the sale of the books, the profits, half of them were being loaned out by Prabhupada to different countries. And the remaining other half was going back into the book printing. And by giving out loans from the BBT, Krishna consciousness was established in Australia, in Africa, in Europe, in India. The Jehu temple was built by loans which were given from LA BBT. The Vrindavan temple, the Mayapur land, all of that was purchased by sale of these books. So the Srimad Bhagavatam has been the very foundation of ISKCON, not only in creating the philosophical basis but also the financial basis. So Srila Prabhupada, he actually established Krishna consciousness all over the world, not on the basis of a group of people who came with graduate and postgraduate degrees in their CV. And based on that, this ISKCON was established. The Krishna Consciousness Society has been established on the basis of Srila Prabhupada, empowering devotees who were willing to follow his word. So sincerity and submission is more important than skill and assets in Krishna consciousness. So therefore, a few devotees who are willing to serve with sincerity and submission, they can be more powerful in their impact than with a group of people who may be highly qualified, educated, but they do not align with the vision of the Guru Parampara. So Vaishnavera gunagrahi na dekhaye dosh. Kaya mani vakya kare Vaishnava santosh. Purity in intention, purity in inspiration, integrity, intelligence, intensity. When all of these 5 are there, then there is impact. And that's how Srila Prabhupada could create the impact through his disciples across the world. And we need to focus on these 5. automatically impact will happen. And so, here, Kaviraj Goswami says that actually, at this stage, he actually was very much looking forward to following the instruction being given by Sri Haridas Pandit, who was the Acharya of the Govinda temple. Tehoti kripa kori agya koila more Gaurangera shesha lila barni bharatore. So this Haridas Pandit, who was the head priest, Mahant of Govinda temple, he gave instruction. Gaurangera shesha lila barni bharatore. Remaining pastimes of Lord Chaitanya we described. और जत वृंदावने पैसे भक्त गण शेष लीला सुनिते सवार होइला मन. And all other devotees also, they got inspired, and they said to Kaviraj Goswami, you should write the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. More agya korila sabe karuna koriya Asamar bole likhi nirlajja hoya. So he says, actually I had no qualification, I had no positive assets, no skill. But more agya korila, I was given the instruction and order mercifully by the devotees. Jai Shri Shri Gauranga Sitaram Lakshmana Hanuman Ji. More agya korila sabe karuna kuriya. It was the compassion of the devotees that I was given the order. So to be given order by the Vaishnavas is a great privilege, not a burden. Kaviraj Goswami says that in the Madhya-lila, that Vaishnaver Agya Gun, I have been given order. Agya Dhan Brajera Vaishnava Gan Vandataha Mukhya Haridas Chaitanya Vilas Sindhu Kalolira Eka Bindu Taha Kana Kohi Krishnadas. So Agya Dhan, he says, I have been given Agya Dhan. That order, that instruction is my wealth. But many times we consider it Agya Gan. That why I have been given that order? Why me? Why not others? He says Agya Dhan. So here again he mentions the same word. That Ati kripa kori agya koila more. Ta sabar boli likhi nirlajja hoya. So now that he was given the instruction, Kaviraj Goswami starts thinking. And what is that? Vaishnavera agya paya chintita antare Madana Gopal Gela Agya Magi Bare. So he's actually residing in Govinda Dev temple, but his Ishtadev is Madan Mohan. Vaishnavera Agya Paya, when he received that instruction, Chintita Antare, he became Chintita, he became thoughtful. Chintita doesn't mean worried or bewildered that why I was chosen. So this Chintita is not why seva is given to me. This Chintita is how I can do this seva. There is a big difference. When you start thinking why, you become morose. When you think how, you are enthusiastic. How I can do it. Vaishnavera agya paya chintita antare. And therefore a devotee is never alone. This seva is given to us by the Lord through his devotees. It is for the Lord. So the Lord is always available as our partner in this journey. Chandrika Vishadas Mairis Arunapanga Vikhitai Swakarthanami Varajasattvabhyam Srishtrapalaka. When we come in front of the deities, you see the deities glance and you see the deities smile. When Krishna glances upon the devotee, that glance of Krishna, the glance of the deities, creates spiritual desires within the devotee's heart. And when the devotee starts serving and there are challenges and difficulties and the devotee starts thinking, is it worth it? Why am I doing this service in the first place? Maybe I should give it up. And when the devotee feels discouraged, he should look upon the smile of Krishna. The smile of the Lord is encouraging the devotee. Please continue serving. I am with you. You are not the doer. You are simply a nimitta on my behalf. Act as my instrument. Swakarthanam ivraja sattvabhyam srishtripalaka. So therefore, faced with the prospect of a Herculean service, which was unprecedented in its magnitude, which was rivaling a super excellent service done by a predecessor, Vrindavan Das Thakur. Sometimes the service appears more humongous when you see that someone else has already done an excellent service in the same sphere. So how can I write a literature which would rival or at least equal in its quality as Chaitanya Bhagavata Vrindavan Das Thakur? Chintita Antari. But that Chintita did not mean that he just sat there and went into paralysis by analysis. No, he prayed. And when he goes to the temple of Madan Mohan and prays, what happens? At that time, there was a pujari whose name is Gosai Das. He is offering to the deities at that same moment when Kaviraj Goswami is offering prayers along with all the other devotees. At that time, Prabhura Charane Jodi Agya Magila Prabhu Kanto Hoite Mala Khosiya Podila. As he offered the prayer at that same moment, the garland of Madan Mohan fell on the altar. And Gosai Das brought that garland and placed it on the neck of Kaviraj Goswami. And all the devotees chanted, Haribo!
Haribo!
So it was at that moment all the devotees glorified him. Agyamala paya amar hoila ananda tahai kahino ei granthir arambha. That moment, Kaviraj Goswami considered that Madan Mohan has signaled that I can start this writing. That was a confirmation that the blessings of the devotees has been completed by receiving the blessings of Madan Mohan. Ei granthe lekhai more Madan Mohan Amara likhana yena shukir pathan. This deities have been, this Grantha has actually been written by Madan Mohan. This Chaitanya Charitamrita, what I am writing, is actually written by Madan Mohan. But I am simply used as an instrument. Sai lekhi Madan Gopala ye lekhaya Ashthira puttali jena kuhake nachai. Madan Mohan is playing on the strings and I am simply acting like a puppet. Kashthira puttali, like a wooden doll. कुलाधी देवता मोरे मदन मोहन जार सेवक रघुनाथ रूप सनातन. My family deities are Madan Mohan. My Kula Devata is Madan Mohan, who has been served in history by Raghunath Das, Raghunath Bhatta, Rupa and Sanatan Goswamis. So I am simply receiving their grace. And so Kaviraj Goswami is saying that actually I have no qualifications. But although I have no qualifications, I have full faith in the power of the blessings of the deities, of the gurus, of the Vaishnavas. Hari Guru Vaishnava. मूर्खनी चक्षुद्रमोयी विषय लालस वैष्णवाज्ञा बोले करे एतेक साहस. He says, I have 4 disqualifications. Murkha, I am foolish. Neech, I am fallen. Kshudra, I am insignificant. Vishaya lalas, I am addicted to sense gratification. So someone may say, then why you are trying to write? Vaishnavagya Bali. I may be powerless, but I have faith in the power of the instruction and the blessings of the Vaishnavas. The power of blessings of the Vaishnavas is making me undertake this service. Vaishnavagya Bale Kore Eteka Sahas. From there I get my guts. From there I get my enthusiasm. Vaishnavagya Bale Kore. And that is how ISKCON has been established. In 1922 on a rooftop in one Ulta Danka Junction Road. One statement spoken by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, preached in the English language. Srila Prabhupada takes that one statement, that's the seed, and nourishes that seed with his devotion, meditation, his commitment, his faith for more than 4 decades. And then out comes the beautiful banyan tree of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness with its branches and leaves, giving shade to the millions of people suffering in the scorching heat of Kali Yuga. And therefore, here Kaviraj Goswami is also referring to that. Vaishnavagya Bale. Do not underestimate the power of the blessings of the Vaishnavas and the Gurus. Shri Rupa Raghunatha Charaner Eibal Jar Smrite Siddha Hoye Vanchita Sakal. The power of meditating on the lotus feet of Rupa and Raghunath is such that simply by remembering that lotus feet, Siddha Hoye Vanchita Sakal, all of desires can get fulfilled. By remembering the dust of the lotus feet of Sri Rupa and Raghunath. Echai Gosai Jara Charana Bandhan Jara Hoite Vigna Nash Abhishta Puran. Fulfillment of desires and destruction of obstacles happen simply by meditating on the lotus feet of such Goswamis. So, Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is empowered by the blessings of the devotees in Vrindavan, is empowered by the 6 Goswamis, is empowered by the instruction of Sri Haridas Pandit, is empowered by Shri Madan Mohan Dev, is empowered by Shri Nityananda Prabhu to compose Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. And when a service is performed, empowered by the blessings of such powerful transcendental forces, the impact of such service is eternal. And so Srila Prabhupada in the 70s took a break from the translation of Srimad Bhagavatam and focused on writing the translations and commentaries on Chaitanya Charitamrita. And for 1.5 years he was focused on that, and then he gave a Herculean task of publishing within 2 months all the 17 volumes, because he wanted all the volumes of Chaitanya Charitamrita to be published. Because other sampradayas have published the Bhagavatam, but Chaitanya Charitamrita is something which is unique to our sampradaya. And Prabhupada wanted all of it to be available in his own writing. So therefore, we are very grateful to Srila Prabhupada, who took his efforts, went through so many difficulties and challenges to give us the gift of Krishna consciousness and offer us the gift of Harinam, the gift of Bhagavatam and Chaitanya Charitamrita, the gift of the deities and the temples, the gift of the Vaishnavas to serve, the gift of revealing the glories of the Holy Dham. And thus all we need to do is express our gratitude to Srila Prabhupada by experiencing the power of Krishna consciousness in our own lives, and then reaching out to others, sharing that Krishna consciousness. Name Ruchi, Vaishnav Seva and Jivedana. So I am very grateful to the devotees here at ISKCON of Tobacco. There will always be ups and downs, challenges and difficulties. As I said, this is the material world. And to practice Krishna consciousness in the midst of difficulties and challenges gives a different kind of thrill. Otherwise, life will be boring. So you need some challenges, you need some difficulties, you need some, different kinds of situations. But the fact is that in today's Kali Yuga, people are becoming more and more hopeless, engrossed in sense gratification, engrossed in gross materialism. And Srila Prabhupada's Krishna consciousness movement is bringing hope to the last mile. And therefore, it becomes the responsibility of the Krishna conscious devotees to take this calling very seriously and know that they have a huge responsibility on behalf of the parampara. Because today 99.999% of ISKCON is the grihasthas living in their houses. You have a list of addresses in Back to Godhead magazine. ISKCON temples, addresses across the world. In those buildings, only 0.001% of ISKCON devotees stay. Right? And therefore, the future of ISKCON is very much dependent on how all of you, the congregation and the grihasthas, how you take up Krishna consciousness, with what degree of intensity, consistency, faith, enthusiasm. The future of ISKCON is in your hands. And therefore, you have to know that now we are moving into a phase where in 1977, 99.9% of ISKCON was within the temple. Today 99.9% is outside the temple. So this is the real ISKCON. So the future is in your hands. So it becomes your responsibility to understand the tradition deeply, practice the process with enthusiasm, and then share this message with others. And in due course of time, thousands and thousands of people would get connected to this process. So therefore, New York is a large state. There could be many ISKCON temples. Like in Delhi city, Gopal Krishna Maharaj has made 17 temples in one city. In Mumbai, we have already 6 or 7. Right? So therefore, as many temples, the more the merrier. No problem. And so all of you are doing a wonderful service in Srila Prabhupada's mission, and inspired by these teachings of Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, I hope and pray that all of you are empowered to practice Krishna consciousness with greater intensity and be inspired to come together to bring a closure to this beautiful temple which is coming up in ISKCON of Parsippany, and build a beautiful new house for Shishi Radha Krishna. Thank you all very much. Hare Krishna. So we have Aarti now.